Welcome to the Passive House Podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos, and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, join the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House Podcast. Zach Semke, Happy New Year and welcome back to Passive House Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Matthew Cutler-Welsh? Happy 2021.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to I'm looking forward to a great year.
Me too.
We're putting some of the challenges of 2020 behind us. But some great things happened in 2020, and one of those was just the growth in Passive House around the world, not least of which has been assisted by Passive House Accelerator and all the great work of the team there. Really enjoyed the global happy hours and the technical session, Technical Tuesday, which happens on a Wednesday for me because I'm in New Zealand. But it's just been fantastic to see all that, and really excited to have some more good stuff coming in 2021.
Yeah, me too. 2021 seems like, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to be, establishing a new normal after, with the successful rollout of vaccines around the globe. And so some things we all know will probably return to normal, and people will be very eager to actually have face-to-face contact. And I think that, there are also things probably that we can take away from this period and some good things that came out of it all. And I think that this, while it's not the same as being in person, these virtual connections, especially the ones that we can make across, oceans and continents, the way that we're able to do with this podcast, for instance, and with things like the happy hours and all the global conferences that organizations are putting together around Passive House, all that's really great. And it's, I think, going to help accelerate the adoption of Passive House and catalyze zero carbon buildings. So, that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
I think we've experienced kind of this step jump in access to lessons learned, stories from practitioners recently that can only be a good thing.
Absolutely. And something else that's gone online a lot in the last 6 months has been training. And that is the focus of this week's interview as we crack into the episode. Daniel Kress is a Passive House trainer, and he runs the Smart Plus Academy, which started out as a physical training of the designer course and also tradesperson course in Australia. Started out in Perth, but Daniel found himself doing quite a lot of training on the East Coast, where there's a little bit more demand in Sydney, Melbourne. But during 2020, he started putting some of his stuff online, and it's really grown rapidly in the last few months, so that he's doing training full time. And I think he's actually got another team member helping him out now. Daniel is originally from Germany, and he started out as a carpenter. He actually went and did a bit of carpentry in Ireland, as he outlines in this interview. From building, he wanted to go and understand a bit more on the technical side, and went back and did some study and became a consultant, because he felt that as a builder, he was only able to work on one or two houses a year potentially, but as a consultant, he could have an influence on a greater number of buildings and influence them in a positive way. And really, that same reasoning is why he started the Passive House Academy, because he just wanted to spread the word and have a greater influence. And by becoming a trainer, he realized that he could train 10, 15 more people, and those people would then go out and have an influence. So as a provider of trainer and passing on this education, it's really his way to influence the industry and help it move faster than he feels that he could, just as a builder or even as an architect or a consultant. So here is my interview with Daniel Kress from the Smart Plus Academy. And I think I started out by asking Daniel how he got started in this and Passive House in the first place.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for joining us. It's a pleasure to chat to you. I want to start out with Australia. What do you like about Australia?
Good question, and thank you for having me. So what do I like about Australia? I like the lean back culture that we're having over here, and the opportunities over here. It's the country of milk and honey, I would say, compared to Europe, where everybody's competing already in a really tight market. Over here, everything is far easier. I like the culture of this lean back culture we're having, the nature. Like, I'm now living in Manly, Sydney, and I just need to walk a few meters. I'm on the beach, like a few hundred meters. I'm up in this little hill up there. So, it's amazing from the countryside.
And tell us how you ended up being in Manly, because you went to university in, firstly in Dresden as a technician, but then you've done civil engineering also in Germany, is that correct?
Yeah, and then I went to Canada to do my master's. So yeah, I've been all over the spot. Yeah.
So how did you end up in Australia?
So how did I end up? Like, my former colleague Ian from Ireland, like, I've been working in Ireland as a carpenter. He started a business over here, and he asked me to come over and help him to build this business. So a building company. And then I said, yeah, first I have to finish my studies. It was just before going to Canada. And then I went to Canada, agreed with him, I'm coming over, wrote my thesis on passive house design for Perth, Western Australia, did my thesis in 3 months and jumped into the plane, came over, did whatever I could. But then the whole business went a bit sideways and wasn't in line with my beliefs and my quality. So I moved on and went into consulting, and then purely into teaching, because that's where I see the biggest impact for myself.
Yeah, so tell us about that transition, because that's your focus now is teaching. Was that your motivation, because you felt you couldn't do enough by being a consultant?
Yeah, exactly. Like as a builder, like when I was back working as a builder, I could maybe build 10, maybe 50, maybe 100 houses a year, and that's all the impact I could have. Then as a consultant, I was able to help a few projects here and there. And I always wanted to go into the teaching part, because I think that's what was needed most, or what is still needed most. And then, but I never believed that I'm able to actually be teaching, that my whole business could be teaching. And then it just turned out that way, that teaching is actually able to pay my bread and butter, and that I can now focus fully on it and actually drive the whole business. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just want to jump back to, you mentioned Perth. We skipped over there. You were studying your master's, but that you were in, was it Germany at the time, or were you in Toronto at that stage?
So I've done 2 masters. I've done a German civil engineering degree, and I've done a Canadian civil engineering degree. And I was able to flip a few courses between them, and then writing one thesis for both. And that was the thesis for Australia. So I was writing my thesis for Canada and Germany, and the topic was Australia.
So how did that come about? How did you end up writing a thesis on passive house design for Perth while you were on the other side of the world?
Because I was headhunted by Ian. Like he was trying to get me to Australia, and I agreed on it. So before he said, yeah, come over. Then I said, I can't, I'm still studying. Then he paid me the tickets. I came over, saw what's the potential over here and the need. And then I was flying directly from Perth to Toronto, doing my studies there, flying from Toronto over to Germany, finishing my engineering, like my master's over there, wrote my thesis and came back to Perth.
So you had a bit of an insight into Perth before you arrived. I guess you started looking at the climate and some of the housing, and then you arrived here. Arrived in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia.
Yeah.
What was your impression?
Like when I came to Perth, I still felt like being an alien. And when I went to the home show, I saw everywhere like this solar passive. Yeah. And I said, oh yeah, they're talking about passive house. And I went into these conversations with a lot of enthusiasm and thought, yeah, they know what passive house is. But then I realized it just speak about solar passive design, and they didn't really understand the full concept of passive house. And then I had to correct my conversations because I realized they know about the solar radiation, they know about orientation, but all the physics behind it, all the science, all the calculations, that wasn't there. Yeah.
When did you first hear about passive house?
Ooh, good question. I think in 1997, 98, probably in that time. So
prior to studying engineering?
Yeah, like before I even started my carpentry career, there I heard about passive house, and then I was actually fighting passive house because I didn't want to be relying on a machine to get air into my house. So the first 10 years I was against passive house because all this talk about mold growth in your piping and that you're supplying mold into your house and not the fresh air and all these issues. And then what happens when the system breaks? So it took me 10 years to be converted. And then when I understood and realized that it's the only way to actually get constant ventilation happening in the house, that we need to provide a force, the ventilation system, because we can't rely on these unreliable pressure differences that are given by nature.
You must face people with that same initial reaction now. How do you convince them in a shorter time period than 10 years?
I think when you show them data, like I'm trying to show them always a little bit of air quality sensor readings, and I say, see, that is now a house that is totally leaky, and this night the air quality was good, and this night the air quality wasn't good. It's still one person in the room. It's still the same building. So why is the quality good and bad? And that's because the pressure difference between inside and outside was higher. So I could show that, and I said, yeah, this was a leaky house. Like I would say you would have probably 30 air exchanges in that one. You could put the hand underneath the front door, and there were like sash windows in there. So I think that always helps. And as well, understanding that we need a force. There is no reason for the air moving from the inside to the outside if there's not a force, like a pressure difference. And I think with that, it's pretty quickly understood.
So do you have some data? Are you monitoring some houses in Australia that are standard houses, and also have you got access to data of well-performing houses now?
Yeah, like I've been traveling with an air quality sensor for the last probably 2 years now. Mm-hmm. And because of transiting from Perth to Sydney and then doing a little bit of world travel between, I was able to see a lot of different apartments. Like I lived in Perth, went over to Melbourne for teaching over there. Then I was staying in an apartment there, going back to Perth to my apartment, then going to Sydney. So I've been living or staying in a lot of different places, and then I could actually see what is happening, and I'm able to provide now these readings from the different locations. Obviously, I didn't bring my blow door with me for every apartment. It's a bit heavy to travel with. But you saw already how leaky the places were, or not leaky, and then what that was happening, what that was causing issues.
And you just whip out the air monitors wherever you are and start recording the data.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you feel that, or do you find that data is enough to convince everyone, or are only certain people motivated by the numbers and the facts and the figures?
No, it's emotions. 100%. We have to go down for emotions. If you're explaining everything with tech, we will never ever get the whole population to understand what's it about. So the way the Passive House explains Passive House with thermal insulation, thermal bridge-free windows, air tightness, and heat recovery ventilation, that's tech. I don't think that is convincing. Yeah. So I'm speaking about health, sustainability, and economics. So
right. So those are the 5 principles that you mentioned there: the air tightness, the fresh air, the thermal insulation, brakes. And that's a common, people see that image, you can kind of visualize it if they're familiar with it. But what you're saying is that that's the technology side, that's the hard facts.
Yeah.
What works more is the emotional side, the health, the comfort.
Yeah.
And the cost.
Yeah, like if you think about it, what do people want? Do people want thermal insulation? Do people want thermal bridge-free designs? Do they want triple glazing? I don't think so. I think they want a healthy home that is comfortable, sustainable, and affordable. And we have to talk about that side. And with the calculations I've done, a Passive House costs you a coffee a day. And I think that is now a message that is really convincing. When you say, all what it costs you is a coffee a day. That's the additional financial burden that you have. So if you reduce your coffee intake by 1, you are already able to provide.
That could be a tough call for some people. Dropping their coffee. So just explain that. Is that the additional investment up front spread over the life of the building? Is that what you're calculating there?
No, it's the additional financial burden. So when we see the additional, like I'm speaking in this case of a 200 square meter house in Australia, and the additional financial investment up front would be about $70,000 to build a Passive House. So that's the building costs. However, because of investing into my building components up front, my running costs are now massively reduced. Yeah, and if I'm now looking to this additional mortgage payments every month and the savings I'm having every month and putting that to each other, at the end, it's only an additional financial burden of $1,600 a year. And if you translate that into a coffee price of $4.50, it's a coffee a day. Yeah, so it's really.
So you're taking the $70,000. That's based on the same a standard house, and taking that floor plan and saying, what do I have to add to it in terms of extra insulation, better quality joinery, a ventilation system? What are all those extras? It's going to be about $70,000.
So $20,000 is the Passive House designer and the Passive House certifier and the architect that needs to do more detailing. Then then we have maybe $5,000 more in thermal insulation material. Then we have probably $7,000 on air tightness, and then the heat recovery ventilation unit, another $15,000, and then some detailings and things like that. At the end, like when you do the figures, you come to about $70,000, really, really comfortably. Like it's not like trying to really cut your costs wherever it is possible. Like there's ways of making it for less money. And as well, like if you're building now a 200 square meter house for $1 million, or you're building a 200 square meter house for 300,000, it's still the same material. Like it's not a golden sink. It's not the air tightness membrane we're using in affordable housing is the same membrane we're using in your castles, or like your rich places. We don't have to improve that quality of material for that, if that makes sense. It's hidden. It's not the fit out. The fit out is the expensive part.
So a couple of things there. The more expensive the house is, the smaller that proportion becomes, because it's relatively fixed. That's an interesting breakdown as well, that the professional fees and the products. Now, the products you can't do a lot about, although maybe an improvement in supply down to Australia, New Zealand might assist with bringing down some of those prices.
Yeah.
Are there ways that the industry could improve, reduce some of the other costs, like through standardized designs or more efficiency in modeling? Are there ways that we could help bring that initial cost down further?
Like for sure, simpler designs are for sure helping a lot, and not like the biggest saver is going up to the sky. The sky is for free. Yeah. So everybody that's building a single-story building is building the most expensive building ever, because your site is 50% of your cost in a lot of places. Yeah, so
and that's Australia, isn't it? It's
Australia, yeah.
Single-story houses everywhere.
Yeah, so first of all, the city is spreading out, and all your infrastructure is getting unbelievably expensive because of the spread, and you're spending so much money on your land that you don't have to spend. So if you're going from single-story to two-story, you're able to save already 25% of your costs because you need a far smaller site, and I think that is a huge one. And then if you look for windows, when I came, a proper double glazed window that is passive house suitable cost you maybe $1,300 a square. And now we're having it here in Sydney for $580 a square installed. So it's a massive drop. And
is that just with more players in the market?
More players on the market as well, being more effective in the production. Like if you're producing 5 windows a week, or you're producing 5,000 windows a week, your costs, like your overhead is reduced dramatically. And then you can afford as well machinery that is doing far more automated and even neater. Like the quality of the joints in the PVC is improving now as well. Yeah. And at the end, it's still old technology from Europe, but we see there are massive improvements and more players coming on the market. And it's the same we had in Europe. Like go back 20 years ago, passive house windows were far more expensive than normal windows. And now the standard window and the passive house window is costing you the same. It will be the same here in Australia in the future.
Yeah. Do you think there's a danger in giving that price comparison? Because it's essentially saying take an existing house or a basic plan and then adding things to it. Mm-hmm. Is it not a better way to go to say, well, what's my budget and how do I constrain the size or change the shape of the house to design it to the level of quality that I want at that budget, and then it kind of the extra cost kind of disappears just into the overall design?
Yeah, like I know where you're coming from, and I see it different. Like I see it slightly different. Like if you're building a conventional home, you're robbing yourself of your financial future. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you are now maxing out your mortgage with a conventional build that has massive running costs, and they are getting more and more over the years because energy prices are going up. Yeah. So if you're maxing out your mortgage with a standard home, then you're robbing yourself of your financial future. So see what you're able to afford in the passive house quality. In the moment, I think passive house certification makes a lot of sense in Australia. The reason for that is the level of knowledge in the field. So we want to have another set of eyes looking over it, like the passive house certifier. Yeah, so I think certification makes a lot of sense. But if somebody has been building now, say 20 to 30 passive houses over the last couple of years, he knows what he's doing. We still model everything, but we don't necessarily need the whole certification process any longer because we see the figures. We don't need to pay additional. And now because everything is standardized, we know the details, we know everything is getting cheaper. I don't think that passive house certification is necessarily always the right answer, but right now with the market the way it is, I think the certification is this guarantee for performance right now that I would recommend every customer to actually go for.
Yeah, and that it's almost as if that guarantee of performance is part of the challenge of what we need to explain, because I know that Australia, New Zealand, I think everywhere, the assumption is that a house built to the local regulations, the building code, is going to be suitable. It's going to be fit for purpose. I mean, I think that's what the general public assume. They have a right to assume that, but it's just not true. So we kind of need to educate the general market that you actually need to get an independent level of verification that the thing you're investing so much money in is actually fit for purpose.
Yeah, like the National Construction Code or like all these regulations, they are there to keep people out of prison. That's all what it is.
Yeah,
if you're not fulfilling it, you're not fulfilling a regulation. Yeah. So look, if we look to the car industry, would you buy a car that just fulfills a building regulation, or would you go now for an additional outdoor mirror, like outside mirror? Are you going for the airbag? Are you going for the air conditioning in your house, in your car? Are you putting in your nice stereo in there? Like it's in the car industry, we have that already completely accepted that we don't just fulfill the standard, because they're expecting already to have airbags in there. They're expecting already to have your like sleep control, or like seeing in your mirror that somebody is next to you, like all these safety features. In the housing industry, in the building industry, we don't have that yet. They think that the builder is bringing them the right product, but it's just fulfilling the standard. Like it's not even fulfilling the standard if you're honest. Like in a lot of cases, it's not even doing that. So I think we have to change. The building industry must change dramatically, and I think the craziest thing that we see happening is, or that I see happening is, buying your own home is the biggest financial investment, one-off investment of your lifetime. There's nothing more expensive than buying your own home. And if you're now going for the car industry, what is as well a high investment, but it's not comparable to a home. There, everything is already automated. Everything is standardized. Like you can choose your color, you can choose your seats in there and put another stereo in, or like a few features, but at the end, it's the same body, it's the same shape. And I think the similar will have to happen in the building industry for the biggest financial investment of our lifetimes, that gets standardized as well, that we're not starting everything over and over again. So how you call them? The project homes. I think that's the way it might be going to some extent. We can have it far more individualized to some extent from the look, but not necessarily from the shape. But I think that's the way to go. And Australia has been really up front with that, like even in the 60s or 70s, where they're starting with this project homes. So
we need a few of those project managers, company owners, directors of the larger project home companies to come along and do one of your courses.
Yes, obviously as well, but I think we need to educate, like you said, the public, and that's the reason I'm having these free courses on my website where people actually can get a 2-hour presentation about passive house. So what's the benefits of living in a passive house? Like going through all that, and that's really designed for the end user, because if they don't know, then why should they want it? Like if you would go back to the 80s and ask somebody if they want a mobile phone, they would say, "Why should I want that?" Or internet. Why should I want that? Nowadays,
still say that.
Yeah, but like we still have people using horses for transport. So,
so what are the opportunities? I mean, that's a really good point. Is that you're helping to grow that market, and that certainly has grown. In this part of the world, which is really exciting. What are the opportunities if you're a builder or an architect, someone in the industry listening to this? Obviously, they should definitely head over and have a look at the offerings that you've got at the academy. But what are the opportunities for those people to change what they're doing or increase the range of services that they provide?
Like, first of all, I think we have to say that everybody in the building industry wants to do the right thing. I think there is nobody out there that wants to build an unhealthy home. There is nobody in the building industry that wants to build an unsustainable home or an unaffordable home in the long run. I think it's really what is missing is the education. Yeah. And we can't blame them for that because it was never taught to them. They never got the opportunity to even learn it. Yeah. So what is needed is the education. And we see a lot of people in the building industry, like the green buildings, solar passive movement, all that. They all try to do what Passive House is offering. The only thing is the things are out of perspective. Like they're attending these little cuts on the patient, but there's an open heart operation going on that they totally miss. And that is what Passive House helps you with, by putting the things in perspective, by putting numbers down to it. So how much energy do I lose through that thermal bridge? How much do I lose through that glazing, through the frame, through the roof? What's the impact of air tightness or not having air tightness? Yeah, so Passive House is not perfect, and it's not a religion either. Yeah, so if you're not fulfilling Passive House standard, there's no thunder or lightning coming and killing you.
You won't be excommunicated from the industry.
Yeah, so we have to be careful with that, because we have people in the industry that are handling it like a religion, and now it starts to be unscientific. There's still problems with Passive House. It's still not perfect. That's the reason it's an evolving standard. What was the point I tried to do now?
the coming back to builders, designers, nobody wants to build a bad house.
Bad house, yeah. So I think the first step is really doing this Passive House courses, the designer course and the tradie course, as building this foundation of knowledge to do the right thing. It's a little bit a pity that we only have two providers to now in Australia, like Box Hill Institute and Smart Plus Academy. But I'm trying to get everything online and more available and accessible, and getting like automated courses running as well. And to now, these are the only courses that are really, they're getting this foundation. Like all that other stuff is a bit... Yeah, it's greenwashing a lot, or like not getting the whole concept, if that makes sense.
So you see the opportunity as pretty huge. You think that there's an undersupply of people like yourself at the moment? Is it there's more demand than what you can serve?
Like I have in the moment 100 people on my waiting list.
Wow.
Yeah, so like I'm contacting them now and filling up the courses in 2020. So I think end of July, all the courses for 2020 in Box Hill and in Smart Plus Academy will be fully booked.
And do you think those people are doing it to prepare themselves for what they think is coming, or do you think they'll already have interest from clients?
Most people have already interest. That's right. What I see, and or they're frustrated with what is going on. Yeah, like I see.
That's super exciting for Passive House in the region around Australia, and I imagine hopefully that'll overflow to New Zealand as well. That increase in demand. Yeah, like the demand is huge, and I think it's just because it's similar to the coronavirus in a way. Like it's exponential growth. Yeah, like we started 8 years ago. Yeah, in a good way. Yeah, like we're using it positively, this exponential growth. Like 8 years ago, Passive House landed in Australia with one project, and now we have over 1,000 units to be certified. So it's like and a good variety of projects as well. It's,
yes,
you've got have you got a school now certified?
I don't know if
certainly university.
University buildings and student accommodation, and I think a school. I don't know if they went for certification, but at the end it's as well a Passive House.
Yeah.
As well, then this little apartment block, the Fern in Sydney. A lot of resis, even in the flame zone now. We're having a Passive House in the flame zone. So
There's lots of firsts. There's lots of firsts still up for grabs, which is great for developers out there. They want to stake a claim on being the first in something, which is might be a driver
as well.
Tell me. So you mentioned at the start that this is the way that you see it having a big impact, and I can see that play out with those numbers and that demand. Do you miss being on the tools at all?
Yes, missing the satisfaction you're getting from walking on the tools is unbelievable. Really tools. Like I, as a carpenter, still when I'm going home and driving through my hometown, I'm still feeling proud of the projects that I've been doing back in the day. And say, I've been doing this, we've been doing this, I've been doing this. It's a bit different with teaching or working on a computer. Because looking at an Excel sheet is not so fulfilling than actually.
Well, I guess now you've got students to be proud of.
Yes, 100%, and I'm super proud of so many students out there. They said, I'm only doing passive house now, nothing else any longer. They're filling their books. They're doing amazing projects. They're winning awards. It's really good to see. And as well, what I realized is even after the course, you don't know it all. This 2 weeks is only a foundation that we can build on. And I try to enable people to do educated guesses. So that's the reason I'm having this webinar support for all my students. So everybody gets a half a year webinar support after the course. So where we have discussions.
I can see that being really valuable because I know that from doing the certified course myself, there's hardly spent much time at all learning PHP, which is the primary tool. So you almost, like you say, it is only the start. You actually need to then jump in and start doing it and start asking more questions to build on that foundation.
It's the way that I'm doing it in the moment is I'm looking what happens in social media, and the discussions that are going on there, and then out of that I'm normally creating the next topic. So the next topic, for example, is vaporizing the air. A German, a Mexican, and an Englishman are building a house. Everybody has mold. Why? So
it sounds like a bad joke.
Yeah, it is. That's the it is a bad joke. Why do we all have mold in our houses? What I'm trying to do is I'm like with this webinar in particular is I'm creating situation, or I'm telling them about situations where I know that people had mold, and I try to let them find out how that mold actually got there. Why do we have these mold problems? And as well, like we had last week, this discussion about condensation underneath the building, like when we're building on stilts. And then somebody was sharing this article from the US, from Washington, but we have minus 40 degrees in that region. It's a totally different situation. And now people reading technically probably correct material, but not suitable for their location. And that's what happens a lot. It's this half knowledge and this half understanding that is super, super dangerous and could lead to the opposite what we actually want to achieve.
I've spoken to a few designers and builders in Australia recently, and I am excited about the emergence of an Australian typology of sort of a typical Australian vernacular of design that incorporates good shading, sensible open plan areas that open out to the outdoors but still can be closed off when they're needed. And I think I see a hint of, at least in the small part of the design community, of people realising that Australia is not the Mediterranean and it's not Europe, but it has its own climate. But we can still learn from those fundamental concepts from overseas, but implement it in a way that is climatically appropriate.
Yeah. Like at the end, we are all on the same planet Earth.
Yeah.
And the physics
works.
The physics is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And if we understand the mechanisms, the physical things that happen there, then we can build in any climate. The thing is that we have, especially in retrofit, retrofit is a super dangerous thing because we have really localized anomalies, like things that they've been doing in these areas. And now with changing our building approach might cause a problem, like it happened as well in Europe. Like when Germany was reunited, the Eastern Germans went now into our Bunnings and buying our water mixers. Yeah, so they replaced the two taps where you were closing now really slowly and replaced it with a typical mixer that we're having now, these modern mixers. And now all the plumbing was busting over there.
Huh.
Yeah, so because the system was not designed for that. Because you couldn't stop the water so quickly. In Canada, they were thermally insulating a house from the inside, like a really beautiful facade outside with like handmade bricks. And then because now the temperature on the external surface was dropping, the brick wasn't frost resistant any longer. And now the whole facade came down.
Wow.
Yeah, so like these are things that are local situations that we will have similar things here in Australia, like things that we do wrong, but and it's always easy afterwards to say, you've done it wrong. To not doing it wrong in the first place, that's the smart thing. That's the difficult thing. And we will make mistakes over here. Like the building code is creating a lot of mistakes and mold problems, and we will learn out of them. And I think we just have to learn over here, not being scared about making mistakes. And yes, there will be things that go wrong, and that's the way it is. But overall, we have to improve our whole standard over here as well.
I think I'll get you back. We have a whole nother episode on retrofitting, not just individual houses, but retrofitting the market, changing the market. But before we go down that rabbit hole, I want to ask you about what you see, the projection we've already mentioned, the exponential growth. Where do you see things in the building industry in general in Australia in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, so I have this ambitious aim that the building, not the building code, not the building standard, but the building practice will be passive house by 2030.
Nice.
So that everybody is, like the general public is asking for something like passive house, that quality of build, maybe not certified, but that level of health, of comfort, of sustainability, of economical. That's what I'm working to. 2030, everything is going to that standard, and I think in 5 years, passive house will be mainstream word that people know.
And are you implying that you don't really care whether the code follows that or not? You want it to be like that anyway?
Yeah, like I think changing the code is slower, but changing practice, being proud of our trade, being proud of what we actually do, having a standard for ourselves that we are fulfilling. Like being a tradie is like one of the most fulfilling and most proud jobs we could do there. We are building the world that we are living in. Like nothing would be done without the tradies. Yeah, and they are putting the dreams of our architects and of our designers into reality. So it's amazing what we are doing, and I think we have to create this proudness of our trades again, and not just saying it's a job. And you won't see it from my house, this old Irish saying. And then as well, we have our designers, our architects that all, like not all, but most of them, they want to build like a healthy and comfortable living. They want to build sustainable. And I think soon they have the understanding of it in a whole holistic approach. Then we will have there a massive change as well. And there as well, like it should be a proudness there, and not just saying, the market is not asking for it. They're always looking for a 7-year turnaround, and can I sell that house in 7 years with a profit and all that? And I think that has to change. I think in 7 years, it will be difficult to sell a convenient built house that is built today. Yeah.
I look forward to that. Where's the best place for people to find you online, Daniel?
smartplusacademy.com.au. That's the best place to find me, or as well in LinkedIn, in Instagram, or in Facebook as well. I think in Facebook, it's Smart Plus Academy _1. Because there's a Smart Plus Academy in India, and I couldn't get that name in Facebook and as a domain. But
pretty tricky.
Yeah, but
we'll be sure to link those up, and I've no doubt that we'll talk to you again and see how we're progressing towards that industry change.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Daniel. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Matthew, and looking forward to talk to you again.
And that was Daniel Kress of Smart Plus Academy. He's now located on the east coast of Australia, but he's doing stuff online, and I know that he's had interest internationally from people attending some of his training courses as well. So great story, and it's really great to see that growth of demand for not just passive house buildings, but also people wanting to become trained and certified in passive house. What did you take out of that chat, Zach?
Well, it's a great one to start the new year with. I mean, it was just full of nuggets of wisdom, and then this theme of exponential change and exponential growth, I think, was permeated the conversation, and also his professional strategy, that you alluded to in the intro, where he's moving to, leverage his time to figure out how to, make the biggest impact. And that he found that teaching was the way to do that. But the fact that 8 years ago there was one project in Australia, and now there are 1,000 units underway. I've long been interested in what do we do in a world where we've got exponential problems, but we also have we have problems that have exponential power, kind of like COVID or like climate change, right, with positive feedback loops and stuff. But we also have solutions where we can harness exponential growth and exponential power, and passive house is one of those. And so when we see the kinds of numbers that we're describing in Australia, like the 1,000 units is small potatoes in some ways, because you think about all the units in Australia, but when we're seeing in many places around the world a doubling of units every year in passive house, that ends up that math, that arithmetic, that exponential arithmetic can be a game changer. And it's happening all throughout the clean energy transition. It's true for wind and solar and electric vehicles, and it's also true for buildings. So definitely, he was singing a tune that I was enjoying listening to.
Good. The tagline of Smart Plus Academy is creating leaders, and I really like that idea, because I feel like everyone involved in passive house to this point are leaders. We're still at a relatively early adoption stage, I think, globally, even though we're getting more and more traction and seeing some really big projects and uptake in Europe and also parts of North America. But it still requires some leadership and some insight to push these ideas and these projects forward. So I think we should all think of ourselves as leaders in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. And that gets to also another theme that I felt like was coming through in what he had to say. And that's just the recognition that we're where the rubber meets the road in terms of the transformation of the way that we build, right? The transformation of the building industry and the built environment. And that requires leadership. It also requires things like certification and the rigor that brings. So, I mean, he alluded to the fact that right now in Australia, he sees certification as really important. That maybe, when a practitioner has done 20 or 30 passive house buildings, they'll be at a place where they don't need to do certification anymore. They still will be doing the modeling, but they don't necessarily need, they have their details they can replicate, and they've gone through the learning to understand how to do these buildings well. And then he also alluded to this problem of the danger of half knowledge, that half knowledge can get you into big trouble. And so that's again where the leadership, the teaching, the taking responsibility, I think, for equipping the next generation of passive house builders and designers with the learning and tools they need to be successful is so important.
Yeah. So it's really exciting stuff. Daniel and others like him around the world are definitely contributing to changing the industry and also providing some great resources for those of us who want to find out more. On his website, he also has available shorter courses. So it's pretty full on jumping into passive house training. I mean, it's a couple of $1,000s generally. It takes considerable time to sit down. It has to be quite focused. It's quite a challenging exam. What has been lacking is something in the middle, and Daniel's providing that in the form of short courses. Some of them are just on the passive house basics. Some of them are free as well, and these are great if you're got someone in the team who's a little bit skeptical, or if you just want to sort of send someone to find out about some of the concepts. These are really great resources to have. And like we talked about before, because we've learnt to do a lot more stuff online, these are accessible pretty much by anyone and from anywhere.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how important it is as we communicate about passive house that we demystify it. Like it's, yes, passive house is all about the physics behind buildings. No, you don't have to be a physicist to do a passive house. Yeah, maybe you need to be a physicist to create create the details of the certification, but there are all sorts of levels, and I think that one of the things that's so exciting about passive house is that it provides tools to an architect, not a physicist, but an architect, to help engage with physics essentially in design of buildings, and provides a way to do that effectively and safely and and optimize and all those things. And so that same sort of understanding that so a course like that can, I think, help demystify all of that and clarify what passive house design really entails. But I think it also it recognizes I think all of us are recognizing more and more that that not everybody needs to have the same level of deep expertise around the way that heat and moisture and energy flow through building components and through a building. We need to, and so having one of those experts on the team, and then having others who have a basic grounding in the principles is really useful. So it is really great to hear about courses like Daniel's.
Another thing that is important for us all is to recognize where other people are at in their passive house journey. And Daniel mentioned that he was a skeptic for quite a while, and quite a strong skeptic, having been
like
a
10
builder.
years, he said.
And we kind of think of, as someone from Germany, of course they'll just be totally into passive house, when not necessarily. He was a builder in Germany, went to Ireland, and that's where he kind of started finding out about some of this stuff. So we need to appreciate that someone hearing about passive house, and I remember the first time I heard about air tightness in a building, I was like, really? Why would you want to do that? And sometimes we forget where we've come from and how long it's taken us to get to where we are now in our understanding. So it's important that we are empathetic to where people are coming on board early on, and having some of these shorter courses, some of this basic information is really helpful for supporting those people, just getting back to basics and helping kind of grasp like you say, the physics of this and why it works.
And you Daniel's kind of educator mindset and, came through very clearly. I mean, partly he's just got great, ways of boiling things down, like the whole passive house costs as much as a cup of coffee a day. You hear that cup of coffee a day term used in fundraising by nonprofits all the time. But with the cost of a cup of coffee, you can be a major donor of, but he brings that to the passive house. But also the fact that he's running around the world with his own portable air monitor. To like gather data about, I was in this crappy apartment, and one day the air was great because there was a big pressure differential between inside and outside, and so there was lots of air changes. The next day it was crappy because there wasn't that. I think you alluded to the fact that probably works for some and not for others, but there are all these different ways that we can approach the problem. And leading again, just his understanding that we need to lead with things like health and comfort, and sustainability and affordability, not lead with the tech necessarily.
Some great messages in there for everyone. So enjoyed that, and a good way to start off 2021. How are things looking on the event side for 2021, Zach? Is there things kind of starting up again, or what's
They are indeed. They are in full swing beginning this week. So on Tuesday, the Passive House Accelerators Construction Tech will feature a mystery guest of Kevin, co-host Kevin Brennan's. So stay tuned for more information about that. And that's Wednesday for New Zealand and Australia. And then the next day, Wednesday in North America and Thursday in New Zealand and Australia, Michael Ingui, the founder of Passive House Accelerator and principal at Baxt Ingui Architects in New York, will be presenting one of his retrofit projects. He's awesome. He does amazing work. That'll be great. And we'll share all sorts of other info about educational opportunities and other events in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zach. And we should also big shout out to the rest of the team at Passive House Accelerator for helping produce the show, put it together. We would really like your help. If you do enjoy this, please do share it and tell others about the podcast. And if you can head over to Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a rating and review. And it's great to see the numbers growing. It's really humbling from this end, and also it's quite useful to know that we're providing good information. Always open to feedback as well. So if you do have any suggestions, comments, or questions about the podcast, then please email us podcast@passivehouseaccelerator.com. Thanks very much, Zach. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Matthew. Happy New Year. The Passive House podcast and all of the programs of Passive House Accelerator are made possible by generous support from our sponsors. So I want to say thank you to them. Our founding sponsors are Baxt Ingui Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, RDH Building Science, StoCorp, and Zola Windows. And our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. Thank you.